With the Lions starting 2023 with an impressive 4-1 record, some Lions fans have begun to wonder if whether or not the Lions should make a trade to get that last player to maybe put them over the hump. We're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned. It started with an owner who had a last name fans despised, hiring a coach that the experts thought was crazy.
But I got a plan, I swear to you.
Who traded for a QB that was said to be washed up. They said the Detroit Lions would never amount to anything, that it would always be the same old Lions. But this team, our team, has a new identity, defined and expressed by the crazy head coach.
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes, I will beat your ass.
Led by the QB that nobody thought was good. Motor City Mania is in full swing and ready to start. So join the show and be prepared for kneecap biting, because Motor City Mania starts right now. Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and we're diving in right now. As always, to those that are coming back to the show, I just want to say thank you all for coming back. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. Thank you all for everything that you do. And for the newcomers to the show, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the show. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for giving my show a chance. Hopefully I gain your subscription. And with that, I just want to say God bless, and let's dive into the content. So here's the thing, folks. The Lions right now are doing exceptionally well. The fact that the Lions are 4-1, they currently have sole ownership of the NFC North. They're completely in command of their playoff chances going forward. The Lions are in a really, really good spot. Pretty much they control their destiny. They control what happens to them throughout the remainder of the year. When you're 4-1, you've got a lot of ability to pretty much do whatever it is you're going to do, because nobody really is influencing you to make a decision one way or the other, or how you're going to attack or approach a season one way or the other. So that right there puts the Lions in a really, really good spot to start the year. But despite the fact that the Lions have had such an impressive start to the season, some fans particularly have started to come to these rumor mill, what do I mean here? Start pretty much going to the rumor mill and start taking a look at potential trade rumors, potential trade ideas that the Lions could potentially pick up as potential scenarios. And what do I mean by this? Well, again, if you pay attention to the news, you pay attention to rumors, and you pay attention to potential gripings from players, or potentially because a team is not doing really well and they might be in what is known as a sell mode, there are certain players that have come up across the news feed as potential ideas that the Lions could go after, as far as, maybe getting that last player to really put them in a chance for contention here. Because let's be fair and honest here, everybody pretty much at this point already expects that the Lions are going to go to the playoffs. That's pretty much a foregone conclusion. It would just take a colossal collapse of the Lions at this point to not allow them to get into the playoffs. But actually winning in the playoffs, actually going deep in the playoffs, while that's also still expected, a lot of Lions fans are thinking, hey, if we get that last piece, that last really good player that we need, we could really put ourselves over the hump. We really could put ourselves in a position to do something really, really special this year. So what players am I specifically talking about here? The four biggest names that I'm talking about that have kind of come up over the last week, two, maybe three, are these four specific players. I'm talking about Patrick Surtain, I'm talking about Max Crosby, I'm talking about Chase Young, and I'm talking about Devonte Adams. Two of those are from the Raiders, one are from the Broncos, one are from the Commanders. Now, here's what I got to say about this whole thing. When you think about trade rumors are juicy, because let's think about this. Everybody loves the idea of potentially making a deal. That's one of the things. I'm going to say this right now. When you're able to make a deal, particularly for a player like these that we're talking about, it's really something like a jolt. It's like a shot in the arm that really gets the fan base excited. It gets them energized. It gets them talking about stuff, and they really enjoy having that, because it means that, okay, our team is invested in winning. Our team is invested in getting the best players possible. Our team is invested in possibly getting us to that championship. And that's what makes most teams really, really excited about a trade, because it's like, listen, if you're able to pull off a trade for somebody like these four that I just mentioned, you're doing something right. Because a trade is not as easy as a lot of people make it out to be. It's not just, hey, we call up another GM, we figure out what the compensation is, and we're good to go. No, there's a lot more that really goes into making a trade happen. But if you're able to make a trade for a really special, a really unique player like the ones we're talking about in today's episode, that is something that's really impressive to behold. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about it in today's episode here. So here's what I got to say about this. While it is exciting to think about the possibility of getting a trade and considering that, hey, the Lions are actually a team that some players are really wanting to play for right now. I mean, after all, we just heard yesterday that, what was his name, Janoris Jenkins, he actually wants the Lions to potentially call out and reach out to him to sign him, but I don't think that's going to happen. But again, the fact that we're starting to have players that are kind of like self-promoting themselves towards the Lions, like, hey, we would like it if we could come and play for you, that right there already shows that the Lions are not just only a free agent destination that some players have started to, put on their maps, but also it might mean that they are a trade market destination as well. But we have to be reasonable, we have to be logical when we're looking at potential trades here. Because again, trades just don't happen on mere whims. They have to take time, they have to take planning, and they have to be something that both teams are willing to work on and actually agree to. So, when you're taking a look at trades in general, in my honest opinion, there are 5 things you have to consider before you make a trade for any type of player. I'm not even talking like just the star players. I'm talking any player in general, because if you don't consider these 5 things, you're usually going to set yourself up for failure. And what 5 things am I specifically referring to? Here are my 5 things that you have to consider whenever you make a potential trade. The first thing is price. Okay, what's the contract going to look like that you're potentially picking up, or you're going to have to hand out a new one? What's the trade compensation as far as other players, as far as draft capital? That's the first thing you have to consider. Second thing you have to consider is the scheme fit. Pretty self-explanatory. Is this player a fit with the scheme of what do I mean here? A fit with the scheme of what we're running, whether it's on offense or defense. Are they a 4-3 player on defense, a 3-4 player, a 4-2-5? Are they a West Coast? Are they a spread? What kind of player? Are they going to fit with our scheme if we bring them in? So that's point number 2. Third thing you need to consider, is this player a team or a cultural fit for what we're doing? Do they have an attitude? Are they hard workers? Are they lazy? Again, you want to take a look at these considerations before you bring somebody in, because, hey, if they're not a team or culture fit, but they're super talented, you are going to most likely run into some problems here. So again, that's the third thing you need to consider. Do they fit your team or culture? The fourth thing you need to consider is this. Is there actually an opening for the player? Is there a team need for getting this player? Or are you just trading to make a big splash? That's something that a lot of teams have done in the past. Maybe they don't need that player, but it's so tantalizing of an offer that they just make the trade anyway, and then they just try to figure it out from there. That doesn't happen nearly as often as I'm trying to make it out to be, but again, it's something you have to consider. Is there actually a need for that player coming onto your roster? And then the final one that not necessarily gets considered as much, but it's something that I think you should consider. Does the player actually want to play for your team? Because here's the thing, if you trade for a player and okay, the ball club you're dealing with is fine with that because they don't want the player anymore, but the player doesn't want to play for you, that's going to pose another problem, because it's like, listen, if the player's not interested in playing for you, yeah, they might not be on your ball club, but are they really going to have their heart and soul in playing for you? That's something you need to consider as well. So those are the 5 things that I say you at least need to consider, you need to look at before you make a trade for any type of player, whether it's a star player or whether it's a role player. So, when we think about that, before we kind of start getting into the players that I've already mentioned here, we also need to consider one other thing before we start that whole analysis. What is Brad Holmes' track record and history in regards to the nature of how he has done trades? Because let's understand something here. I'm not the one that's making the trade, and I'm certainly not the one that's going to be suggesting these trades, but I know that some fans have. And here's the thing. Okay, you suggest the trade, but we need to take a look at how that trade is going to work with how our GM has actually done trades in the past, which that is a very crucial component. It's a very crucial ingredient in the potential likelihood or not likelihood of a trade actually happening. So let's take a look here. Here's one thing I've stated in the past, and it's been true since the day is long, ever since Brad Holmes has become the GM of the Detroit Lions. Brad Holmes has never traded higher than a 4th-round pick for any player that he has ever acquired in a trade. And what I mean by that is specifically this. I'm not talking about draft compensation like draft day trades. I'm talking about, okay, straight up trade for another player from another ball club. Brad Holmes has never traded higher than a 4th-round pick. That right there tells me something very, very specifically about Brad Holmes. He is very, very he places a lot of value on draft picks. He's not just going to trade away a high-value draft pick unless he views it as a necessity or he has a really high want and desire for a player. And the fact that Brad Holmes has been the GM for the Lions now going on 3 seasons, and the highest he's ever traded away as far as a pick for a player in a straight-up swap of, a trade is only a 4th-round pick, that right there tells me this. Brad Holmes is not very keen on letting high draft picks walk out the door. He likes to hold on to draft picks so that way he can use those high draft picks in the draft for their actual intended sense and purpose. So that's point number 1. Now we get to point number 2 about Brad Holmes. Here's the other thing I can say right now. Brad Holmes, at least from what we have seen about him in the past when he's made trades, Brad Holmes has a penchant for not spending a lot on players in trades because he's a guy that tends to typically buy low. What I mean by that is he usually goes for guys that he can get on the cheap. He's not looking for guys that he can get that are going to cost a lot of money or a lot in draft capital. Again, Brad Holmes is a very conservative, buyer when it comes to figuring out, okay, is this guy first and foremost a fit for our team, but also how much is it realistically going to cost for this guy to come onto our squad, either in terms of draft capital or in terms of contracts? Because here's the thing. Brad Holmes, I guarantee you this. You have to consider where Brad Holmes came from. Brad Holmes came from the Rams. He's got a very good idea. He's had a very good experience of seeing what the Rams did with their franchise and trading so many high-quality draft picks for players to get instantaneous success. But one thing we've seen from the Rams is that by trading all that draft capital, they accrued massive contracts, which then also meant that they were stuck with those contracts and they weren't able to bring in young talent that could potentially offload those contracts in the future. So now the Rams are kind of having to rebuild themselves because of all those trades that they made earlier on for those high draft picks, and then having to spend all that money in terms of either draft capital or in terms of contracts that they had to dole out. I guarantee you that plays a little bit into Holmes' mindset thinking of, okay, I'm not going to spend a whole lot in terms of draft capital or money when I'm potentially bringing in a new player from a new team. That's part of the reason why I think Brad Holmes likes to buy players on the cheap. That's point number 2 for Brad Holmes. But then, point number 3, let's take a look at something else about Brad Holmes. Brad Holmes is actually more likely of a chance to trade away players from this squad than he is to trade for them. Because you have to think about it. In all of the times that Brad Holmes has made trades, very few of them have stayed long-term on the team. The only exception so far of a player that Brad Holmes has traded for that's still on the team from the time that he made the trade is quarterback Jared Goff. Other than that, most of the guys that he's traded for have only been on the team for a year or so, and then they usually wind up getting cut or going somewhere else. Because let's think about it. Trinity Benson, he's not really on the team anymore. If he is, he's a practice squad player. Okay, then you take a look at Michael Brockers. He played for 1 year with us. Then after that, we kind of got rid of him because he no longer was really doing anything for us. Then you take a look at some other guys that we've traded for, such as Denzel Mims that we picked up from the Jets earlier this year. He didn't even make it out of camp. That's my whole point. If you think about it, Brad Holmes, when he trades for players, they usually don't stick around very long. The only one so far that has bucked that trend is Jared Goff. But if you think about it, Brad Holmes has had no problem in trading away players such as Matthew Stafford, such as TJ Hawkinson, such as Jeff Okudah. He's traded away much bigger name players than he's actually brought in. So in my opinion, Brad Holmes has a much more likely chance of trading away players that no longer fit what the Lions are trying to do, or he can get a lot of good draft capital for and then replace in the draft. That's what my other point here is this. So again, when you consider the 5 points that I had earlier, plus how Brad Holmes likes to do his business in terms of trading for players, We have to then consider and analyze the likelihood of these names that I just brought up in terms of the rumors, in terms of fit, and all those things. So let's kind of take a look at this. Let's take a look at the very first player, Patrick Surtain. This is a name that has really garnered a lot of steam lately, and it definitely makes sense because Patrick Surtain, in my opinion, is a definite scheme fit with what the Lions do on defense. Surtain is a press man corner. He's a guy that you can stick out there on an island. He definitely fits Aaron Glenn's system as a defensive back. And he's a definite team need right now because the Lions are a little bit thin at cornerback. We just brought in a guy yesterday and signed him to the practice squad. But again, the Lions could use another top corner to fit into that cornerback room to kind of give it some juice, kind of give it some much needed reinforcements. But again, you have to think about it from this perspective. The one thing about this that I really have to think about here is this. We don't really know, first and foremost, a couple of things about this whole problem. First and foremost, does Patrick Surtain actually want out of Denver? The Denver Broncos might be selling because their team their team's season is pretty much already done. But we really don't know if Patrick Surtain wants out, number one. But I don't really see that being much of an issue because I really don't see why Patrick Surtain would not want to play for the Lions, who are a hot destination right now for most players. And on top of that, the Lions are 4-1, the Broncos are 1-4. So I don't see why Patrick Surtain would not want to play for Dan Campbell and the surging Lions versus the floundering Broncos. But then you also have to take a look at something else. The other considerations that I put out there. Is Patrick Surtain a culture fit? I would like to think that he is. He's a hard worker. There's no visible or reported issues. It would seem like if he were to come here to Detroit, he would fit right in. He would just need a week or two to get acclimated to what's going on, and he'd be able to start working. The problem with Patrick Surtain is not scheme fit, it's not culture fit, it's not team need, it's not any of that nonsense. The main issue is price. You have to understand what's going on here. The Broncos selected Patrick Surtain 9th overall in 2021. That was only 2 years ago, folks. And let's also consider this. He's only 23 years old, and he's considered one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL already. The Broncos are not going to part with Surtain cheaply. They're going to want their pound of flesh. Let's just put it out there quite plainly. They are going to want something back in return because you have to understand something. First and foremost, they just selected him, so they're going to want draft compensation back for a player that they selected so high. But then on top of that, there's the rookie deal. Rookie deals have a much higher cap hit, a much higher dead cap hit because, okay, now you're having to pay out that money that's fully guaranteed on that rookie deal, especially for first-round picks. And then you have to consider this as well. What is it now? He's in his third year out of his potential 5 years that he's got coming up. There's the fifth-year option, but the Lions will soon have to sign for Surtain if they were to trade him. Well, here's the problem. The Lions have other players that they have to sign right now, such as Jared Goff, Jonah Jackson. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown coming up pretty quickly. They've got guys that they have to sign, and they've got other needs they got to take care of rather than bringing in another mouth to potentially feed. So again, that's another problem to consider. And the final thing to consider is this. The Lions have got a draft that's upcoming that has some really good cornerback prospects that they could use some of their draft capital that they've got right now, rather than trading for a guy that's really going to require a whole lot of draft capital and money to bring in. So in my honest opinion, could the Lions make the trade for Patrick Surtain? They could, but I don't think it's a smart idea because it's really going to put us in a bind and it's going to really hamper us in being able to make decisions later on down the road, which is, again, part of what goes back to the whole decision-making process of Brad Holmes. So that's the Patrick Surtain situation. The next one is Max Crosby. Again, another name that has really floated up in the last couple of weeks here because what Lions fans really want is somebody else paired opposite of Aiden Hutchinson to really get after the quarterback even more so than what we've been able to do. Now, let's understand something here. As tantalizing of an offer that is, we have to take a look at the overall spectrum of what this could really mean for the Lions. First and foremost, is he a culture fit? Definitely is a culture fit in my opinion. He's one of the hardest working players in the NFL. Whenever you talk to other players and other people that have played with him or played against him, they've got nothing but good things to say about Max Crosby. So there's that. Is it a team need? The Lions do have a good amount of edge rushers alongside of Aiden Hutchinson. But let's be fair here. They don't have anybody that is on Max Crosby's level that you could put opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. So again, it's a very tantalizing option. It's a very tantalizing consideration to have if you could get Max Crosby next to Aiden Hutchinson. Then you have to take a look at the player wants. This is where it starts getting to be a problem as far as Max Crosby. Again, the Raiders have not been good for a very long time, but I don't think that the Raiders and I don't think Max Crosby are going to want to leave each other because let's think about it. Max Crosby just last year signed a 4-year, near $100 million contract. That right there makes it extremely unlikely that the Raiders, first and foremost, are going to trade him away because, again, dead cap issue. But then on top of that, why would Max Crosby want to leave a team that he just signed a contract extension with? Again, the price is self-explanatory because, hey, first and foremost, you're going to have to take that contract that I just talked about. But then on top of that, the Raiders are not going to part with a guy that's only 26 years old, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, for next to nothing. They're going to want, again, their pound of flesh. So again, I find it extremely unlikely that this kind of a trade is going to fall its way into the Lions' lap. Then we take a look at the other edge rusher that we got coming up on this list. That's Chase Young. Again, much like Max Crosby, this guy's got a lot of talent. He's a good hard worker. He should be a culture fit. And again, if you were to pair him upside next with Aiden Hutchinson, you really have a prolific pass rush. But the bigger issue for Chase Young in this case is not even necessarily the price or anything else. It's his injury history. Because for me, it's like, listen, you are a player. What's the key word? What's the root word in that word? Play. You need to be able to play. You need to be able to be out on the field. And for me, that's a problem for Chase Young because Chase Young, in the 3 years that he's been in the NFL, has not been able to play a whole lot. If you go back and you take a look at all the times that he's been in the NFL so far, he's not played one single full season in the NFL. The closest he ever got was his rookie year when he played in 15 games. Since then, he has not been able to crack double digits in terms of the games that he's been able to play. That's a problem because, again, if you're going to trade for a player like Chase Young, again, you have to consider the price. You have to consider the fact that, okay, that's now a spot that you've got to give up for somebody else so you can bring in a player like Chase Young. That to me makes no sense because if you can't get that guy even on the field to play, why in the thunder would you trade for him in the first place? So that for me, again, just doesn't make any sense. The price the price ratio versus what he's going to give us versus what we're going to have to give to get him, that to me just doesn't make any sense. And then there's the final one, which is the only offensive player on this entire list. And to me, it kind of makes sense because the offense really doesn't need any added reinforcements, but I know that I've heard some people talk about this guy, and that's Devonte Adams. Now, let's understand something here about Devonte Adams. Devonte Adams is an absolutely phenomenal talent as a wide receiver. He's one of the best in the NFL. But I'm going to be quite honest with y'all here, folks. Devonte Adams is becoming a locker room cancer because we have to understand how Devonte Adams has gotten to the point that he's gotten to here. Let's think about this. First and foremost, when he was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, Devonte Adams wanted to get paid. The Packers were wanting to pay him a certain amount, and it was going to be a good amount, but it wasn't enough. So then what happened is Devonte Adams said he wanted out. He wanted to go to somewhere that was going to give him the money that he was looking for, which then wound up with him getting traded to Las Vegas, right? Well, here's the thing. Now he's been in Las Vegas, and now he's saying that he's tired of losing. He's tired of not being able to win. But it's like, wait a minute here, dude. You just got paid all this money, and now you're not winning. Could it possibly be the reason that you're not winning is because you took so much money to where you couldn't bring in more talent to surround yourself with to improve your team's chances of victory? That to me is a problem. So it's like, first and foremost, if you're going to take all that money and then the team's not able to win because you took so much money, that to me means you don't have any right to complain, number one. But also, number two, you left a team with Aaron Rodgers to go play for the Raiders. That right there to me, as much as I don't like Aaron Rodgers, any quarterback virtually is going to be a downgrade from Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers, as much as I don't like him, he is a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I'm sorry, Derek Carr played with the Raiders last year when Devonte Adams first got there. Carr is no Rodgers. That's just a point blank state of fact. So for me, it's like that right there again doesn't make any sense. Now, as far as the cost is concerned, if the Raiders continue to lose, maybe they might want to jettison his contract, but then that brings a problem for the Lions because it's like, listen, we simply don't have the cap space to deal with a freaking contract like Devonte Adams. And on top of that, I don't think he's a culture fit because Devonte Adams does not seem to be kind of like of Dan Campbell's mindset. And then finally, you have to consider what the Lions already have on their roster in the first place. The Lions have a pretty solid wide receiver core to begin with. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds. You still got Jamo that you're trying to figure out. We've got some pieces there. Now, granted, Devonte Adams would definitely give us a weapon that we haven't had since, the days of freaking Calvin Johnson. But to me, it's simply not worth the hassle of trying to get him dealing with all the money, the culture difference, and all this other nonsense to make a trade work. It's just simply not worth it. Because you have to think about this here as I wrap this whole thing up. We have to take a look at how trades have worked in the past. Sometimes trades work really well. All sometimes a player needs is just a change of scenery, and they're able to just rejuvenate their career, a.k.a. Jared Goff. Jared Goff just simply needed to change of venue from the Rams to the Lions, and now Jared Goff is a top 5 quarterback in my opinion. Some people might still disagree with me, but it's like, listen, take a look at the damn numbers, take a look at the production, and it pretty much speaks for itself. But those types of trades don't happen nearly as often as the trades that don't work out. Case in point, let's take a look at some of the worst trades that we've seen happen over the last, 10, 20 years. Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, Antonio Brown, Trent Richardson, Roy Williams, our Roy Williams when we traded him to the Cowboys. Those are all versions of trades where the team that got those players after the trade was executed did not get what they were looking for after the trade was finalized, because every single time those players either have not met the expectations that they were supposed to have coming in, or they just completely flopped. That's my whole point. Trades are a double-edged sword. So sometimes, yes, it does work out. But more often than not, it's not going to work out because usually there's a reason why a team is trying to trade away a player. Either they're not playing very well, there's a problem, they're a cancer, whatever term you'd like to use, there's something going on that usually you as your team doesn't want to bring in, but you're desperate enough that you're willing to make that trade, you're willing to make that sacrifice in the hope that it might work. So again, when you think about it from that perspective, I say trust what Brad Holmes has done. Trust the process that him and Dan Campbell have started here and how they've built this team. Because take a look at how the Lions have built this roster. It's been through smart free agent signings, and it's been through great drafting. Not by making swing-for-the-fence types of trades, which are really foolish. Again, the best way to build a team is being economical in free agency and making great draft day decisions, which is exactly what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done over the last 3 years. So for me, it's like, listen, if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. Again, don't try and, start with messing with the formula that got you here just because, hey, it'd be really nice if we could get that one blockbuster trade that could put us over the moon. If you do that, it might upset the whole balance of the team that you've got. So for me, it's like, listen, don't make a swing for the fence type of trade right now. Stay the course, do what you've been doing, and let the process work itself out here. Plus, on top of that, just to point this one last thing out there, the Lions have the draft in Detroit this upcoming year. I want as many draft picks as possible so that way the Lions get their limelight. Let's just be fair and honest here. So that's just something else to kind of add at the end. It's not a really big consideration, but it's like, listen, stay the course, folks. Trust the process that Holmes and Campbell have set up here. Don't make foolish trades at the last minute just thinking that it might just put you over the top. The Lions are in a really good spot. No reason to start going all freaking crazy, hoping and praying that one last player is going to get us into the Super Bowl. I still think we're about a year off from that. But again, just stay the course. But anyway, folks, I know this was a bit of a long episode here, but I felt that I really needed to go over this in full depth and detail here because I know there have been a lot of fans that have been wanting to see the Lions make a trade, particularly for some of the guys that are on this list that I've talked about. But I think I've done a pretty good job of explaining my view, explaining the process, giving all the evidence that I have. So now I'm going to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these 3 things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, first and foremost, out of everything I just said, I hope you do subscribe. But second of all, I hope you also turn on that bell notification icon at the bottom of the page after you subscribe, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, everyone subscribing, that's great, but let's make sure you turn that bell notification icon on so that way you never miss any more content that I put out, so you're always up to date with the latest content that I have to provide. I also encourage y'all, please share the content that I'm making with your friends and family members, especially your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anyone that you can, so that way we can continue to spread the channel and it can continue to grow. And with that, folks, I just want to again say thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patience. Hopefully for the newcomers that decided to tune in, I gained your subscription. And I just want to say again, thank you all for what you do. God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.